Hey, it was feeling like a shop update was way overdue. So I just wanted to go through a few things that happened this week. Built some drawers for TIG welding rod storage, and that's going to go over here. You can see there's another drawer, so potentially two of these drawers are going to stack, and that will hopefully be the right height. Another project that got us into is raising the height of the stool for the TIG welding station. This is something that was found on the side of the road a couple years back. You know, three of these legs pulled out easily. The other one is frozen inside. So that might involve some slide hammer, which funny because we posted about that slide hammer on TikTok and maybe Instagram a while back as far as being one of the favorite tools. So we're going to try that next to get that leg pulled out of there. So that's something that's been on the go. I know we had a couple things in the milling machine, just playing around with little projects this week. Faced off the end of one of these tubes for these load stands. You can see there's a load stand base right here. There's another load stand here, roller load stand. So those have been handy to put those in use. So these telescopic inside 2x2 by quarter wall hollow structural steel pieces, they were drilled. The top of this one here needed to be faced off in order for these holes to line up on this frame. So just picking away at some little stuff like that. We got some stuff for machine dollies and machinery toe jack. That stuff, just taking the mill scale off of that right now. And had the planer, the jointer, this wood jointer. It was more like a personal thing as far as wanting to be able to do some of my own personal woodworking, but salvaged some wood for making the TIG welding rod drawers. So this came in handy in terms of they were rough cut lumber and just got to plane it down a little bit to make it smoother, less splinters, just not going to attract as much dirt on the surface. And we're also using the table saw and the miter saw, which have been great in that if it's worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. You know, ideally we'd be making drawers out of metal. We'd be using the press brake. We get all this stuff dialed in. But between only having a shear for 16 gauge and the cost of material and having wood on hand, it just makes that a really appealing option. So other things, thinking about better storage. And one of those things would be having something like a shipping container or a transport trailer in terms of having something that's mobile would be ideal. And just thinking about how some dry storage for a lot of stuff like all these things in these banana boxes that, well, we talked about the work in progress cart, and that's something that is valuable to have on the shop floor because that can get wheeled around to the workbench or to a workstation to have projects worked on and have projects handy when we're held up on a larger project, or when there's a student here, they can work on their project as they're available. It's still one of those things that there's a lot of inventory, like nuts and bolts cabinets. A lot of this stuff would ideally be on a mezzanine. Well, I mean, there's also more of these cabinets up on the mezzanine. So ideally, stuff like that, if we freed up some of the space that just carries inventory that isn't fast moving. Some of the stuff, nuts and bolts, drill bits, stuff that's stored in here, super handy to have close by. But there are a lot of tools, like we don't use a hammer drill that often. There's a lot of different tools and other things that if we had a secure shipping container or storage trailer, like come-alongs, yeah, there's all kinds of different tools that we don't use that often, and it'd be nice to have some storage. So just trying to think of some creative ways. The phrase that keeps coming to me is it's not our lack of resources, but resourcefulness. So trying to think of who would have an old transport trailer that they're trying to get rid of, that, who are those people that I have not developed relationships with, that I know where I'm at when I'm moving out of one phase of life or one piece of equipment and into something else. Nothing feels better than finding a really appreciative home for something. It's not about the money. I mean, having the value of it honored, but sometimes I know something's gonna sell for $20 And if someone appreciates that at $100 value, even if they can't give that $20 for it, it just feels way better in terms of nurturing those long-term connections. So trying to think of where to meet some of those people that would really appreciate what I might have to offer. So that's something, if you want to comment below, I'm going to make an effort to look at those comments. That's another thing I could work on as far as encouraging comments that would actually start the kind of conversations that would make me really gravitate towards looking at them, because we all know how YouTube comments can be in terms of people saying, oh, I could have done this better, quicker, faster, nicer. Why didn't you do it that way? Why didn't you do it my way? Of course, that was going to happen to you because you missed this. Anyhow, there can be all that negativity, but just think about if there was one glimmer of light in YouTube comments, that would allow me to take a step back and really walk through all the other things and being thicker skinned in terms of realizing that there's not always going to be someone there to pat my head and tell me I'm a good boy. So that's been one thing that's been a recurring lesson in business in terms of thinking about how to branch out and to have more tough conversations, just in terms of finding, one of the things that feels vulnerable for me is reaching out to others and finding out where we might really be able to serve them. So thinking about how to do that, and that might take a lot of conversations by the time we get to that point of someone saying, you know what, there is this thing you could do. So really looking at the long game in terms of how to do more of that, looking at long term, how do we make this place viable? What services do we start offering? How do we come up with some products or longer term that allow us to work with more people that we'd want to be friends with, instead of just, oh, this person has these skills we need, so we got to hire whoever has the skills. Not the most enjoyable business model. So yeah, I don't know what else to say as far as the shop update. Working on some bookkeeping, just did a 5th harmonized sales tax audit. Just flew through. After doing 4, the 5th one, very easy. Still took a good part of 6 hours to get all the papers together, to figure out which were the 10 largest purchases, which were the 10 largest invoices, sorting those invoices out, just reading through, making sure everything was in good shape, looking at our spreadsheets, making sure everything made sense. Yeah, so stuff like that, when it can really seem like it's eating up time, being able to say, you know what, this is way better than a lot of other jobs could be doing. This feels better being on an adventure, trying to make something work for myself. And not to say that I wouldn't enjoy working for someone else, somewhere else, but to really say, you know what, I want to give this everything it takes, instead of just getting that voice going that says, oh, the government's after me and these people don't like me and this thing's not working. And the other pleasant thing that happened this week is crossing paths with some people I hadn't seen for a while who requested quoting on some work. And in the back of my mind, there's like, oh, I feel like the last interaction didn't feel the most positive. I wish I hadn't have said that thing. I wish it hadn't have gone this way. How do I reach out to this person? We just happened to have a chance encounter on the street. And it was like no time had passed, and it was like that last negative interaction wasn't even top of mind. So realizing all those times, I mean, we can all be our own worst enemy. So giving optimism a chance. Anyhow, I think that covers enough for this video. Who knows? I'm sure there's other things to update on the shop. Please comment on what updates, what things you're curious about. Say, hey, what's that thing you got going there? What's that all about? Who knows? Anyhow, thanks again. Until next time.